All right, the relationship between gravitational acceleration and the velocity of light is what we're going to talk about today or touch on. Uh, this is an article that I just came across on social media on my feed or whatever. This popped up. It's from these two individuals here, our cousins in China is where this is coming from. This is coming from the Journal of Environmental Science and Engineering here. But again, I'm not a physicist or a mathematician, so a lot of this is way over my head. I was I was in the slow readers group in elementary school, so it's a cinch that I'm not going to be the one to explain all of this, but it's I do recognize all the effort that's going into this, and I see that there's some connections, some interesting connections to what kind of what I'm going down the path of in the book of Numbers, in Bamidbar there, in those given numbers. But just to explain this, I guess, on this article right here, gravitational acceleration is defined as acceleration of an object under the action of gravity, and it is typically calculated using the universal gravitation formula. The speed of light, meanwhile, represents the propagation velocity of light in a vacuum. Superficially, these two quantities appear to have no direct correlation and fall into distinct categories of physical quantities and concepts. Nevertheless, through dimensional analysis, we can derive the calculation formula for Planck time. It reveals the unity of space-time and matter energy, as well as the unity of quantum mechanics and relativity through the combination of the gravitational constant g, the speed of light c, and the reduced Planck constant. So, yeah, the relationship between gravitational acceleration and the speed of light can be directly derived from the Planck time formula. However, this derivation process is a circular proof, which leads to logical errors and invalidity. Based on the mass-energy equation of special relativity and the assumption of the helical motion of the speed of light, the earliest cosmic space of the Big Bang, we attempt to establish the relationship formula between gravitational acceleration g and the speed of light c from a strict mathematical perspective, disclose the true meaning of the Planck physical quantities, and thereby identify the material and space-time basis for the unification of the four fundamental forces of the universe. So, yeah, that's saying, I guess, quite a bit. Obviously, there's some conceptual basis of they're letting you know that, they're kind of aligning with the Big Bang concept, which is going to be separate than from kind of what I'm seeing things from the biblical standpoint. But that's okay. That doesn't mean that any of the fruit here, the efforts and the fruit that's coming from those efforts is going to be is bad. From what they're doing, we just gotta take pick from the bones, But this is very interesting that they're finding a correlation between these two concepts of gravity, what we call gravity, and what we call like light, the speed of. Okay, I had to find my sheet. Okay, so this is what I was getting down towards, this concept of the Lord as I'm seeing it from the biblical perspective of these two. It's the marriage of these two sort of pillars, these two axes that are giving us the division of night and day and the division of above and below. That's given us sort of this material plane. Again, the union of these two, one flesh, and giving us these chambers that create the potential for these different luminaries. The sun in this quadrant, somehow the moon through here, and then the stars in this neutral quadrant. But again, this concept of this dielectric force bringing everything down would be sort of the gravity, everything basically everything being drawn into this central point and that has an inverse and opposite reaction of this sort of light and space that's getting thrown up, like we see in just as we see in a magnet, and magnetic patterns that we see from the manipulation of that force and seeing it in matter. So, at any rate, it's sort of this concept of marrying these two things, because again, it's going to be the same crossing of this is what's going to give us this concept of gravity, as well as this concept of light and illumination that's given us. Again, you're marrying this two sides of the bridegroom of this off to create your illumination, but that base fabric that the light is being carried through, that base structure is going to be there, provided by this same elemental thing, which that I see, or what I'm understanding, is being the Lord, like what we're talking about with the Lord. And I've got other videos that go into in depth to explain this, whether it's the tablet Shamash video or the musical notation and Descartes and all that stuff. But at any rate, getting back over here to this again, so in this other branch, so our empirical sciences that we're going through, even though we got a different concept of the structure of everything, it's the same observations that's taking everything down to this particular conclusion. So you can read through this again. I don't know what any of this means. This is just like Latin all the way through. So I'm not the one to try and break this down. What you do find in this is, in some of their mathematics explaining this, you run into this is where you're going to run into that concept of the fine structure constant in this 137. So I do see that number, that clean number, shows up in here in all of their efforts here. Again, my apologies to the physical science communities and all this, because I'm not up on everything that they've the evolution of all of their language and their findings and all of this. But I do recognize it as being of value. But so they arrive at this sort of diagram, and their conclusion is, through the hypothesis of the helical motion of light, speed, and the space during the earliest stage after the Big Bang of the universe, we have disclosed the true meanings of the described Planck physical quantities and theoretically derived a relationship between gravitational acceleration g and the speed of light c. Herein, the Planck length is the step size of the helical motion of space in the earliest stage of the Big Bang. The Planck energy scale is the minimum energy unit of the helical motion of space at this moment. The Planck mass is the mass transformed from the minimum unit energy of helical motion of space. The Planck time is the period of the helical motion of light speed in the space at this moment. Through calculation, it is discovered that at the moment of the separation of the strong nuclear force, the calculated values of the four fundamental forces based on the assumption of the helical motion of light speed in space are in complete agreement with the experimental values or theoretical calculation values of modern physics and quantum mechanics, thereby providing an interesting hint for the unified field theories. And these are all going to be all your references to what went into their study here. So obviously a lot of work. What it is arriving to, though, is sort of the same thing. Again, in Ezekiel's vision, you're seeing, if you're looking from the center, you're seeing this clockwise rotation from all these different directions. So however you're going to look at this, if you're top-down view or side view, whatever it is, you're seeing that it would be sort of this turning, almost like a spider gear type thing of a turning and a turning and a turning, which is kind of how I'm seeing what that explanation is. But what I did was, again, what it's telling you is that this value, this width, is going to be the same as the step, or whatever they're calling this. So they're finding a correlation between these two things of the wavelength and then this however this works. And then this 137 showing up in the fine structure constant, and it's showing up here in this equation. Whether that means the same thing, I don't know. But what I did was I took this, and I'm seeing sort of this same pattern when I'm looking at, so when I'm going through and I'm finding the tribal numbers right here as it's telling us, and again I'm finding, the first thing I'm finding is this quarter of the circle, this grouping of man, the 151, 450, and then setting that to that even 90 degrees, you find that other piece of Levi, and then you're finding the placement of Levi later on, and you're moving them around. But at any rate, you're finding, once you do this and you get this adjustment to this other number, you're getting to and finding that you have this importance in these bifurcations. And I explain all this in that of how I found this in that Encampment of Israel series. But nevertheless, you're going to arrive at sort of this breakup. And again, in the numbers, it's telling you that that you're to kind of keep these Reuben, Zebulun, and Issachar together because of that, the way they use that pakad in the appointment of the numbers in chapter 2. So when they march out, it's telling you to keep these together. So it's singling these out, trying to show you to keep these together, I think. And then in that first chapter, Simeon's name or his appointed number is singled out with that pakad. So you're given directly the breakup, and then I think there's things that you're supposed to find. But at any rate, when you find this, and you find the quarter, and you find Levi, and then you start laying these guys out in the circle, you find that this portion of Judah South right here is at 23.5 degrees that we associate with the ecliptic plane. And then I go on to show how this is relative to 5 squared times 9, and then we can find that relationship in the right here in the analemma right here with the sun analemma, and I go on to explain all that kind of stuff. But at any rate, yeah, that 23.5 degrees shows up there, and we associate that to the ecliptic plane. But what I did was I looked at this what do you call it here, this diagram, and I don't know whether or not this is exact or not, but it's funny that this arrangement right here, you get this same, I got this ecliptic cross, so I figured, well, I don't know if this diagram is to scale for these values, but I figured I'd rotate this and see if I couldn't get it to overlay it. So I end up rotating this 11 degrees because this is a little bit off center, and then you lay it over top of this, and sure enough, it seems proportional, pretty proportional. So I don't know if this is to scale, but you're hitting on this sort of ecliptic degree amount of the entire circle. So that 23.5 degrees, it's tied into this, it looks like, as well. And then the other thing is this 137. So another thing that you find in these numbers is, once you find these bifurcations and these breakups of all of these tribes, they all have a least common multiple of 50, and you can boil that number down to this other base number, which again, you find this 233 with the total as well as in Judah North here. And so there's only, of all of these numbers, there's only one prime number out of all of these numbers when you boil them down. All of these have factors, like Gad's number, this is 83 times 11, and then obviously these are all not prime numbers, 793, 61 times 13. Well, this ends up being the only prime number that you end up with, is this 137. So when we look at the numbers here and what their factors are, the only one that shows up, the only bifurcation that you get once you set that ecliptic cross, is going to be right there, that Reuben West. And again, that value, that 4.070, that is going to be the number for Levi in the second census. So when we adjust this and find Levi's number in the second census, we see that his number, the 4070, and then we know that this times phi is 6585.39. So that's going to be your number of days between eclipses. That's the closest number that you can get to. So definitely interesting that I came across this today. Again, I don't know if it would be nice if you could get people that really know this, right? That are deep into the mathematics and know the physics and all of this, and could marry this with sort of what is being explained in the biblical numbers from 3,500 years ago. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with everyone, and definitely go check out this if you understand all of this and know this language and know mathematics and physics. It would be great if you get caught up on the biblical side of things. So, but at any rate, hope you enjoyed that. Talk to you later.